Einen wunderschönen guten Tag, meine lieben Freunde der deutschen Sprache. A wonderful good day, my dear friends of the German language. Without further ado, I suggest that we simply first have a look at the alphabet of the German language. It will not come as a shock to you, since it is almost identical to the alphabet in the English language. There are just a couple of nuances, a couple of different pronunciations, but we are going to take it step by step. Don't worry so much. Everything what we learn in life requires a tiny little bit of effort and a tiny little bit of time. So simply relax and just go through this first lesson without any sort of too much concentration, too much worry, so you get a slight idea how the syllables, the words are pronounced in German, and then we simply proceed in this module. It will get trickier and trickier, but since we're going to go step by step and quite slowly, it should not be a very big problem for you. The German language has 26 letters, which is very similar to English, and then there are 4 extra letters. And we are simply going in the order, as you also know from other European languages, for instance, English, French, Italian. Most likely the easiest letter whatsoever is A. A is a sound you have in literally every single language in the world, and it is also identical in German. Die Ameise. Ameise is the ant, der Affe, which is the monkey, or your German teacher, if that matters, oder das Alphabet, the alphabet. A will be one of the letters which will not cause any trouble whatsoever, because there are not different nuances in the way how you pronounce it. Das B. In German, the letter B is pronounced B whenever you see 2 points or 2 dots after a vowel. It means that it is pronounced longer. So if you pronounce just the letter in and by itself, it is B and not B. Die Banane, der Bus und das Boot. Das hier ist ein Boot. Boat is some sort of small boat or a yacht or something in that vicinity. Having said that, since we had boat here, German and English are very related to each other. They're both Germanic languages, so you are going to encounter a huge amount of words which are almost identical. They're written a little bit differently, but by pronunciation, it's pretty much the same. The boat, das Boot, is very difficult to make some sort of difference between. That's a huge advantage when you approach German from English or from Dutch, for that matter, or from Scandinavian languages. It is a very accessible language. Der dritte Buchstabe, the third letter, das C. So it's not C, es ist das C, zum Beispiel die CD, the CD. I assume that many of you from the audience here have never seen a CD, so simply turn back time 30 years and then you know with what people of my generation have grown up. Oder Caesar, der fast Kaiser des antiken Roms, the almost emperor of ancient Rome 2000 years ago, Julius Caesar. Das D, the fourth letter is D. Das D, zum Beispiel, for instance. Zum Beispiel means for instance or for example. Die Dame, the lady. Das hier ist eine sehr hübsche Dame. This is a very pretty lady. Das Dach. Das Dach ist the roof. I. Now, this is a vowel which is tricky in German. The reason is that it could be pronounced E or it could be pronounced E, depending on the position of the letter in the word, and this is one of the vowels which determines whether you have a clean and smooth pronunciation of German or whether it sounds a little bit rough, aggressive. So over the next lessons, I will quite often draw your attention how to pronounce the letter E, because it makes a huge difference. The reason why I say that is that my very first pupil in German was actually my father, and he had very, very big difficulties in not in learning German. He could learn it quite quickly, but the letters E and O were always quite problematic. So the letter in itself is pronounced E. For instance, in der Elefant, der Esel und die Erdbeere. And you already maybe have heard it out that the way how I pronounced E differed a little bit. It is not der Elefant, es ist der Elefant, usually. Der Esel, but not der Esel. Und das ist die Erdbeere. It is not Erdbeere. There are not really rules when you pronounce it E or E. For instance, in the case of Esel and elephant, I cannot give you an explanation why in the case of the elephant it is der Elefant. It sounds strange when you say der Elefant. It is as if you would be wasting time. It is not a harsh mistake, but indeed it is one of the vowels where over the course of this course I'm drawing your attention quite often. Das F. This letter is pretty much the same as in English. Zum Beispiel, for instance, die Fabrik, the factory, der Ferrari. Hier, das ist ein Ferrari, ein sehr, sehr schnelles Auto, a very fast car, as long as it doesn't smash against the next best wall. And the window in German ist das Fenster. Das Fenster. G. In German, it is das G. You already see again, you have an E with 2 points after it, so you pronounce it long. Das G. For instance, in die Gitarre, the guitar, die Geige, which is the violin, das hier, da drüben, das ist eine Geige, und der Geist. In English, this should be a ghost, der Geist. So this letter, as long as it is pronounced as it is G and not G, is very, very similar to English. Now, this is a tricky one. This consonant H is a tricky one. The letter in itself is H, das H, and you already hear it, or maybe you even see it. It is a letter which is coming out of your throat. And throat-born letters in any foreign language are rather tricky to master. You have this when you learn Arabic, for instance. They have a couple of letters. You basically have to form a whole new set of muscles in your throat in order to be able to pronounce it properly without actually splashing your, your dialogue partner with saliva and all sorts of delicacies from your throat, because it requires a little bit of exercise. Das Herz, the heart, der Hund, which is this cute doggy over there, und das Haus, which is the house, obviously. So as long as the H, das H, is at the beginning of a word, it should not cause you any trouble, because it is simply it is as if you want to put a little bit of condensed water on some sort of vitrine, on some sort of glass. You just make this sort of movement. But H, when it comes after a vowel, is very often mute. I just say this once, so you have it in the back of your mind. And of course, we are going to go deeper into this later down the road, just for you to simply remember the letter H is a tiny little bit more special than most other letters. The I. In German, this letter I is pretty much always pronounced E. So it is pronounced like the fifth letter of the alphabet in English. In German, this one is E by pronunciation. Die Insel, which is the the island, der Igel, which is this cute hedgehog over here, und das Igloo. Das Igloo ist ein Haus aus Eis. I think that you already understood what I said. Das Igloo ist ein Haus aus Eis. In this sentence, you already see how close English and German can be. I said that the igloo is a house made out of ice. Tricky letter coming from English or from French or from Romanian or other languages, because in German, usually it is very close to this letter, but it is not just E, it is Y. The letter in itself is pronounced J, but when you have it in a word, then it is usually a J. For instance, die Jacke. Die Jacke is a jacket, but it's not Jacke, it's Jacke. Oder the boy in German is der Junge. In fact, when you have this word for boy, which in German is der Junge, you have the English word of to be young. So der Junge, in fact, is a youngster. And then, indeed, you have some sort of correlation to English. And by the way, having said all that, jong, written with a small letter, means young in German. So, in the very sense of the word, der Junge actually means youngster. The letter J is pronounced J in German. In fact, since we are there anyway, there are very few exceptions where it can actually be pronounced J, as you have it in English, but this is usually in names from English, for instance, like John. Of course, in German, when we talk about somebody from America called John, we don't say John. This would be silly. Nobody says that. It is John indeed. But this refers only to proper names. If you have words which are not indicative of a name or a city, of course it is Jacksonville and it's not Jacksonville, which is silly also. But if you have proper words, then indeed it is J and not J. An easy letter. Das K, the letter in itself pronounced K, but it is K, this sort of sound. Der Käse, which is cheese, oder der Koch. Der Koch means the chef. This letter here, the 12th one of the alphabet, is also quite intuitive. Das L, or the letter, is pronounced L, but in a word it is simply L. Das Lamm, which is this tiny, cute creature over there, der Löwe, which is the lion, oder here, der Lehrer, which is the teacher. I just hope that I look better than this guy here. M, another quite straightforward and easy letter, M, which is M. In a word, die Maus, which is the mouse, der Mantel, which is a coat, und hier der Mond. Der erste Mensch auf dem Mond ist Neil Armstrong gewesen. The first man on the moon was Neil Armstrong. And another easy letter, it is N in a word, die Nacht, the night, der Nebel, which is the fog, und hier die Nase, which is the nose. O. Maybe you remember when we were 10 letters back at E, I told you that O is the other vowel where you have to be a little bit careful how to pronounce it, because you can pronounce it O, which is open and long, but you can also pronounce it O, which is closed and sort of restricted by the time you need to pronounce it. And very often it makes a big difference whether you pronounce it O or O. Das Obst, which is the generic term for any sort of thing which we might be calling fruit in English, die Orange, which is the orange, oder der Opa, which is the grandfather. Das hier ist ein Opa. Whether you pronounce O long or short is very often determined in what constellation the letter is located inside the word. We will be having an extra lesson just about this issue. So at the moment you can relax, just keep in the back of your mind that this vowel is a tiny here. P, the 16th letter, der 16. Buchstabe is the letter P. Shouldn't be a problem. It's simply P in the way how we pronounce it. Zum Beispiel der Paprika, which is the bell pepper, or in some parts of the English-speaking world, you actually say capsicum. Der Papst, which is the Pope. Der Papst lebt im Vatikan. The Pope lives in Vatican City. And a tiny exception is when you have the combination of P and F, then it's not really P anymore, it's Pf. It is as if you would be letting air out of a balloon without making it burst. It's Pf. In this case, the horse in German is das Pferd. Das Pferd. This is also when you have this combination, be careful not to spit too much into the lovely face of your conversational partners. Q. The letter in itself in German is pronounced Q, as you see here, and very often, in fact in most words, I think, I can't really think of an exception, it comes in the combination Q and U, as you have in all three examples over here, and you have two ways of pronouncing it, and both, I think, in most cases at least, are correct. You can say die Qualle. Das hier ist eine Qualle, a Medusa. But you can also, instead of Q as a pronunciation, you can also say Qu. So you can also say die Qualle. Both of them are actually correct. Das Quadrat oder das Quadrat. Both are okay. It means the square, where all four lines have the same length. Oder der Quark. Der Quark is some sort of cottage cheese, highly popular in many parts of Europe and also in Germany. Tricky letter, the R, which in German, das R. The reason why it is tricky is because you can either roll, sort of the tongue is rolling in your mouth and then it's R. But you can also pronounce the R coming out of your throat. And then it would be a completely different sound. For instance, you could say der Regen, but you could also say der Regen. It is one of these consonants which determine whether you have a foreign accent or not. It will take some time for almost all foreign German speakers to actually master this letter. It will take a couple of years, but for the beginning, simply don't stress yourself too much about it. Just keep it in the back of your mind. The topogon, or the slide, is die Rutsche. Here, indeed, it is coming rather from the throat. If you say die Rutsche, this sounds rather harsh, even though there are certain areas of Germany where their regional dialect is rather rollish instead of throatish. Das Rotkäppchen. Das Rotkäppchen is one quite famous figure in one of the German-born fairy tales. Das Radio, very intuitive, das Radio, und the rain ist der Regen. S. The S has two different ways of pronouncing. When it is at the beginning of a word, it is usually Z. It is die Sonne. It is not die Sonne. Der Sack. Der Sack is some sort of bag or a sack. Und der Saft. It is not der Saft. So usually it is a B sort of sound, like a B. It's Z. And when you have this sort of snakish sound, this is usually an S which is in the middle of the word, and there are one or two rules which give you the indication how to pronounce it. We will be having a special lesson about that. Das T, that's an easy letter, no worries, absolutely. Die Tomate, it's the tomato, der Tisch, which is the table, and die Tür, which is the door. This letter should not pose any sort of difficulties, so shouldn't you. Das U, die U-Bahn, das hier ist eine U-Bahn, which is the underground. Die Uhr. The Uhr is some sort of watch or a clock. The Germans don't really distinguish so much between watch and clock. Pretty much everything which tells you what time it is could be called die Uhr. For instance, if you want to know what time it is, the Germans don't ask what time is it. They ask what watch or what clock is it. Wie viel Uhr ist es? What time is it? Wie viel Uhr ist es? Jetzt ist 11 Uhr und 58 Minuten. It's 11:58. Und dieses Land dort, this country over there, das ist Ungarn, Hungary, Ungarn. The letter U shouldn't be tricky at all whatsoever. On the other hand, why should a language be that easy? This letter here, V, you already see we pronounce it V, so it is very often rather an F sort of sound. It is not V as you have it in English and many other languages. So this sort of car here is der Volkswagen. It's not Volkswagen, Volkswagen. It's one of the most famous German car brands. It means literally the carriage of the people. Fortunately, now it has an engine. It's not really a carriage anymore. But this is what Volkswagen actually means. It's one of the oldest German cars. The Vater is der Vater. And even though it is der Vater, it is not written with F. It is written with V. Why? I have absolutely no idea whatsoever. There is no rule for it. Many aspects of languages, you also have this in English, are definitions. And whenever you hear the term definition, it is very difficult to find out why something is. It simply is, and certain things, fortunately or unfortunately, we have to accept. So I cannot give you a rule for everything, but whenever I know a rule for something, this is a promise I give you, I will be giving you the rule. Die Vase, which is the base, and here again, it is not die Phase, es ist die Vase. Now, please don't ask me why now you have V and not F by pronunciation. You have to learn it by heart. But I would say 80 to 90% of the V's are actually F and not V. Und der Vogel, that is the bird. This is der Vogel. It's not der Vogel. W in German is W. So this letter here indeed is V and not F. Der Wald, the forest, das Wasser, water. So it's not Wasser, it's V, Wasser, to pronounce it correctly. Since it is so similar to English, you will need some time until you actually say Wasser instead of water or Wasser. And the wine is der Wein. X. X is a letter which does not happen so often. One of the very few words which came to mind when I prepared this module here is an instrument which is das Xylophon. It's not xylophone, it's xylophone. The letter Y, which will be the next slide, is very often pronounced Ü, das Xylophon. Or this pretty lady's name is Roxana, which is very, very popular in some Eastern European countries, and yours truly, Alexander. I think I did not even introduce myself in the beginning of the lesson, but this is also not so important. But anyway, my name is Alexander. Indeed, in German, this pronunciation is Alexander, which, by the way, is coming from ancient Greece, and it means the defender of the soldiers. And Alexander the Great, who used to be some sort of king in ancient Greece, his wife was called Roxana. Maybe he even married her just because she has an X in her name. We will never be able to find that one out. Y. Why is it called Y? I have no idea whatsoever, but this is how it's called in German. The letter Y is Y. Sometimes it is pronounced I, sometimes it is pronounced J, as if it would be the letter J, and sometimes it is pronounced Ü. There are no real rules for that. Fortunately, when you are learning a language, in this case German, you can actually always try to search the word in some sort of dictionaries on the internet, which also have this feature that they tell you how to pronounce the word, if you are not sure. Die Yacht, here it is a J. Das Yoga, again it's J. Und das Yard. Das Yard is a length, which I think that if you are from England, you know what it is. If you are from America, you actually have to fly over the Atlantic to find out how long a yard is. I can just tell you it's 3 feet, but I'm not going to tell you how long a foot is. Das Z, the last letter of the ordinary alphabet in German, is the letter Z. Das Zebra, which is the zebra, der Zoo, which is this sort of garden where you have animals, und der Zahn, which is tooth. So very, very often this letter here is Z by pronunciation. Very, very rarely, just in small exceptions, it is pronounced Z. Usually it is Z. So these were the 26 letters which you could basically relate to, because you also have them in many other European languages and not just. There are 3 letters which you already know by shape, but they have 2 dots on top. These 2 dots are called Umlaut. Laut means sound. Is the indication that you change. Umlaut basically means sound change. And A-Umlaut, which is an A with 2 dots on it, becomes Ä. And here it is, I think, always Ä and not E. This is the only difference to the letter E actually. Fury, rage in German ist der Ärger. You would never say Ärger. It's always Ärger. Or the piece of water which divides England or Great Britain from France ist der Ärmelkanal. Der Ärmel is sleeve and Kanal is the channel. Der Ärmelkanal ist zwischen England und Frankreich. And of course, 2025, the aesthetic. In today's world, nothing is more important than how we look. The aesthetic, which you have aesthetics as a word in English. Also, for whatever reason, the Germans have decided to write it with A-Umlaut and not with I, even though it would be pronounced the same way if it would be written with an I. So sometimes you do not know why a word is written with with this kind of A-Umlaut instead of with I. And very often you know it. And I give you an example in the first lesson. Der Ärmelkanal is written with A-Umlaut because der Arm is the arm. And when you have the transition from, in this case, A to a sound which is E, then you write it with A-Umlaut and not with I. You have pretty much the same principle with the other 2 umlauts which are coming now. The second umlaut is Ö, which is simply an O with 2 dots, then it's Ö. You have this sound also and also written the same in Turkish and in Hungarian, just in case you are from one of these 2 countries. And as a sound, but written differently, you also have it in Scandinavic languages, like the first name Sören, which I think is Swedish or something in that vicinity. But there you simply have an O and then a line dissecting it. But in German, you simply have an O and 2 dots on it. For instance, das Öl, which is the oil, oder das Ödem. Ödem refers to water accumulations, for instance, in the lungs in this example. Und der Ötzi. Der Ötzi is a frozen dead body which they found in a region of Austria which was called Ötztal. Tal is valley, Ötztal, and this is why they called him Ötzi. I think this happened 25, 30 years ago. I was an adolescent when they discovered him, and apparently he's 10,000 years old, but he looked rather fresh, and this is why he became very, very famous. The frozen man from Austria, der Ötzi. And the third of the three umlauts in German is Ü. So U, the letter U, with two dots in it, is Ü. And here two examples, die Übung, which is the exercise, oder, very, very attractive, we all want that, der Überfall. Überfall means purge, or sort of when people come to rob you, something in this vicinity. Der Überfall, die Übung. There are quite a few words which begin with this umlaut, U, with two dots. Last but not least, we have a very strange letter which, as we can see here, steht nie am Anfang, which means does never stand at the beginning or in the beginning, and it is always S by pronunciation. It's never Z. In German, there are two different ways to call this letter. You cannot pronounce it because it has the same pronunciation as the letter S. So it is either called Eszett or it is called scharfes S. Scharf can mean spicy, and it can also mean sharp, like the razor blade. And I do not know why they call it scharfes S, most likely because it is pronounced S. But it looks like a B. Here you have to be careful. It's not B. So this here does not mean grob. Grob means coarse, rough. No, it's groß. Groß simply means tall or large or great, depending on the context. Or the foot in German ist der Fuß. So it is always a snake and never a bee. It's always S and never Z. Scharfes Eszett. Very well then, this was the crash course going through the German alphabet. I truly hope that you are not headached or panicked or do not want to hear anything about the German language anymore. In German, we say, aller Anfang ist schwer. All the beginnings are rough, simply because your brain does not have so many connections to anything new you learn. So my suggestion is to simply invest a tiny little bit of effort, at least in the beginning. And as soon as you go through the first lessons, slowly but steadily, connections inside your brain are going to build, and then you will be able to attract new ideas and new information much, much easier. And then also it becomes easier to go further down the road. Wherever you are in the world, I wish you a lovely day, afternoon, evening. Take care, stay healthy, and see you in the next lesson. Bye-bye.